This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. And welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History. This dish is a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more information and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey, I'm your host, Steve White. And quick question, do you listen to audiobooks? Well, I've got a new one that just dropped on Audible. It's called Project Renaissance Augmented Reality. It's written by Brian Gates, and it's a gripping sci-fi thrill ride set in the not-too-distant future. I had a lot of fun working on the project, and in fact, the entire 3-book series. So check it out. Just search for Project Renaissance Augmented Reality by Brian Gates and voiced by me on Audible. All right. Now I'm ready to crank up the flame on the old portal-jumping hot air balloon of time and scoot around the sports universe looking for interesting things that happened on this day in sports. There were several milestones and plateaus reached on this day, but let's instead start with what happened on this day in 1983 when Dave Winfield got arrested for killing a seagull. The New York Yankees were on the road in Toronto. This was the final game of a 4-game series. Toronto's exhibition stadium sat on Lakeshore Boulevard, really close to Lake Ontario. It had a reputation of being really cold and really windy before the Blue Jays moved into the Dome in '89. But not just the weather caused issues on occasion, but being that close to the water meant that seagulls would be regular park visitors. In the middle of the 5th inning, center fielder Dave Winfield was warming up like he always had done between innings. He lobbed tosses to Don Baylor in left or practiced long throwing with right fielder Steve Kemp. Well, it was time for the Jays to take some swings in the bottom half, and so Winfield winged his baseball towards the Blue Jays ball boy, who was standing in front of the Yankees bullpen in right center. But the ball skipped past the ball boy, and it crashed into a seagull hanging out on the grass. The gull died instantly. Ugh, feathers everywhere. The ball boy grabbed a towel and gingerly scooped the bird from the turf. In mock tribute, Winfield pulled off his hat and put it over his heart. But he didn't realize one thing. The seagull was on Canada's list of endangered species and beloved by Canadians. Toronto fans believed Winfield had thrown at the bird intentionally, then did not appreciate his mockery, so they started raining down boos on him. There were even a few bottles tossed in his direction. The Yankees went on to win the game, largely due to Winfield's 2 hits and 2 RBI. After the game, though, Toronto police came to the Yankees locker room and arrested Winfield on the charge of cruelty to animals. He was taken to the local precinct, booked, made to pay a $600 fine, and released. The following day, all charges were dropped, and Winfield was reimbursed after police reviewed the incident and labeled it an unfortunate accident. Winfield was apologetic, and he felt bad about killing the bird. Manager Billy Martin had a humorous take on the incident, though, saying, If they had seen the way he's been throwing, they would know it wasn't intentional. He hasn't hit the cutoff man all year. But fans have long memories and continued to boo Winfield whenever the Yankees came back to Toronto. Well, that was until 1992, when Winfield was traded to the Blue Jays. He hit .290 with 26 RBI and finished 5th in the MVP balloting, and then he helped them win their first ever World Series. Winning really does cure everything. Let's stick with news of the weird a little while longer. And how about this oddity from 1982, when Joel Youngblood became the only player in Major League Baseball history to play for 2 different teams in 2 different cities on the same day. Youngblood started off his day as a New York Met, playing center field in Chicago against the Cubs. In the 3rd inning, Youngblood ripped a Fergie Jenkins pitch for a single that scored 2 runs. The Mets put up another one in the frame to take a 3-1 lead. In the 4th, he was informed of a trade, sending him to the Montreal Expos for pitcher Tom Gorman. The Expos were playing a night game in Philadelphia. So, Youngblood packed up his stuff, said goodbye to his Mets teammates, and headed to the airport. He got to Philly's Veterans Stadium in the 3rd inning, was inserted into right field in the 6th, and managed to get a hit off Steve Carlton in his only plate appearance. The Expos lost 5-4. So, not only did Joel Youngblood play for 2 different teams in 2 different cities on the same day and get a hit in both, those hits came off 2 future Hall of Fame-bound pitchers. In 1986, the USFL canceled its upcoming fall season, but in effect, they closed up shop on this day. The USFL had been a renegade football league that started in 1983 as a 12-team league playing in the spring. Its original business model was to offer an alternative to the NFL, but not compete directly with it for eyeballs and people in the seats. But here in year 4, the decision had been made to move to a fall schedule. There are a lot of moving parts to this story, so I'm going to simplify as much as possible. The USFL sued the NFL for $1.7 billion for antitrust violations, contending the NFL prevented the Rebel League from getting a television deal, among other things. 6 days before, the jury verdict had come down in that case, with the jury finding in favor of the USFL. But the jury only awarded the league $1 in damages. That was devastating to the fledgling league. They had no money, no television contract, and there wasn't much to really keep it going. They were hoping that the jury verdict would go in their favor, which it did, and then they would be granted, $1.7 billion, and they would keep afloat. Well, the thing is, the big reason that a lot of people point to as why the USFL came out of this thing so badly was because of Donald Trump. Trump owned the New Jersey Generals, but he wanted to be in the NFL. He wanted to own an NFL team, not a USFL team. And he was willing to sell everybody else out in the league to force a merger and get his team into the league. Testimony during the trial about a meeting that NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle and Trump had in March of 1984 offered decidedly different accounts. In essence, Trump said Rozelle arranged a meeting with him and wanted him to be in the NFL, and he should buy the Baltimore Colts. Rozelle proved that to be inherently false by presenting his meticulously taken notes from that meeting that Trump had set up, not Rozelle. In essence, what this exchange in court really did was make Trump out to be a very unsympathetic witness for the USFL. And it really led the jury to believe that while the NFL may have violated antitrust laws, the real reason for the USFL's dysfunctionality was the league's own fault. And that's why they got only a $1 reward. Trump was so disliked that when court was dismissed, John Mara, son of New York Giants owner Wellington Mara, was sitting next to Trump. He pulled $1 out of his pocket, gave it to him, and he walked out without saying a word. Oh, and the USFL owner who really pushed for the not-so-smart decision for the league to go head-to-head with the NFL in the fall? Yeah, you guessed it. All right, let's go to another story about a guy getting punched in the nose, except in this case it was literal. In 1993, Robin Ventura made one of the worst decisions of his baseball career. This was a game between the Chicago White Sox and the Texas Rangers. In the bottom of the second, for whatever reason, White Sox pitcher Alex Fernandez hit Juan Gonzalez with a pitch, and Gonzalez took first base with no problem. There was no warning to Fernandez and no warning to either bench, leaving the option open to retaliate. And so in the top of the third inning, with Ventura hitting from the left side of the plate, Ryan pegged him right in the ribs. Ventura dropped the bat and his helmet, and then he half-heartedly charged the mound. It was as if he realized that he had made a mistake taking that first step or two towards the mound, but at that point, he was already committed, so he had to keep going. Well, at this point in his career, Ryan is a 46-year-old veteran that was striking out major league batters when Ventura was a toddler. So he was ready for Ventura. And he actually remembered a confrontation with aforementioned Dave Winfield back in 1980 when Winfield was the aggressor after a brushback pitch and landed a shot to Ryan's face. Well, Ryan vowed at that point to never ever let that happen again. And so when Ventura committed, Ryan met him, locked him in a headlock, and started pounding the top of his head. He got 6 good shots in before the benches cleared and converged on the pair, knocking them both to the ground. After the fight was broken up and a few more words were exchanged, Ventura was tossed for charging the mound and later received a 2-game suspension. White Sox manager Gene Lamont was ejected for arguing too loudly. And Ryan got to stay in the game. He pitched a solid 7 innings, struck out 5, and retired 12 of the last 13 batters he faced in a 5-2 Rangers win, and he never faced any penalty from the league for his role in the altercation. Man, those were the days, huh? All right, so I mentioned a lot of milestones and plateaus reached on this day. I'm going to run through these, not to diminish them, but I just don't need to dig too deep. So on this date in 2007, Barry Bonds hit career home run number 755, tying Hank Aaron's all-time mark. On that same day, New York Yankee Alex Rodriguez hit career homer number 500. On this day in 1985, pitcher Tom Seaver picked up his 300th career win. On that very same day, Rod Carew picked up career hit number 3,000. And finally, on this day in 1939, and I've kind of dug back through a lot of these episodes, and I believe this is my first nod to professional wrestling on this podcast, but in 1939, the world said goodbye to Mort Henderson, a.k.a. the Masked Marvel. By day, Mort was a railroad detective throwing hobos off the train. By night, he donned a black mask and jumped into a wrestling match with whomever was willing. When Mort rose to prominence in the mid-19-teens, wrestling was a pretty dull sport to watch. There are reports of 2 wrestlers locking up and spinning in a circle for hours, and one particularly boring match went 9 hours with not much in the way of actual wrestling. When the Masked Marvel arrived on the scene, though, he added a bit of mystery that actually attracted people to the theater where matches were held then to check out this black masked man. And here's the thing. Just as the cries of wrestling being fake now, Henderson was also a bit of a fake. He was planted in the theater seats to stir up attention and encourage people to buy tickets. He had actually wrestled unmasked for several years, but not very successfully. Once he was unmasked and fans realized they had been duped, they didn't care. They enjoyed the spectacle, and so the promoters gave them more of the same, incorporating a lot of vaudeville into wrestling. And you can credit Mort Henderson, a.k.a. the Masked Marvel, for turning wrestling into the spectacle it's been and continues to be to this day. Time now for today's Non-Sports Did You Know? In the city of Wells, Maine, it is illegal to advertise on a tombstone. That's all for today. Thanks for stopping by. Tell your friends about this interesting podcast you found. There really is something for just about everybody in the family on this podcast at some point or another. So have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow with a whole lot more this day in sports history. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.